Jan and Michael Roseborough had a picture-perfect life. A big house, a sparkling new pool, and a 20th wedding anniversary just a few weeks away. But under the surface of every happy marriage lie the seeds of betrayal.
Their affair was just unbelievable, sickening.
This was murder. Cause was not accidental.
And later, Melinda and David Harmon met at church camp and are models of marital devotion. But temptations soon abound.
They were spending so much time together that it wasn't hard to believe that something was going on.
When passions heat up and secrets are exposed, even a summertime fling can become a deadly affair.
Never in my wildest dreams did I ever know anyone who was murdered.
Because two is company, three's a crowd, and one is a killer. Don't you love the summer? Everything is just so hot. When the blood heats up, there's no telling what a man or a woman might do. Like my second husband said, or was it my third? There's no shame in enjoying the finer things in life, but best to enjoy them one at a time. For Michael Roseborough, the grass was always greener in some other woman's lawn, so to speak. He had to learn the hard way that a secret affair can get you in some very deep water. Jan and Michael Roseborough have lived their entire lives in a small, close-knit haven in the heart of Amish country. So pretty much everyone knows their names.
Michael Roseborough was part owner of the Roseborough Funeral Home, which was a business that his grandfather had started. It was passed down from generation to generation.
Jan's family was very well known. They had built several businesses in the community.
And when the two get married in the summer of 1989, it's a perfect match.
They were Ken and Barbie of that community. They were popular, they put on social events, had parties.
Jan was just very kind. Her smile was amazing. And Mike just came off as very kind and understanding.
They were just the kind of people that everyone got along with. They were good as a couple.
So good that it's easy for Jan to overlook the fact that Michael's profession is a little less than glamorous.
I think Jan was proud of Michael and what he did. He did a good job with the funeral home and dealing with people. He did a very good business.
And the paycheck the undertaker brings home isn't too shabby either.
That kind of money coming in on a yearly basis blew me away. Michael said that he never had to worry about a lack of customers because they would always be people dying.
And Michael has poured a big chunk of his change into Jan's childhood home, where they are raising 4 kids of their own. Like a king in his castle, Michael is quick to hold court, throwing parties and backyard barbecues for friends and family.
Michael liked to be the life of the party. He would make sure everybody was as comfortable as they could be if they had everything they needed. He was a people person.
Men want to be him, and women, well, they just want him. A perfect gentleman. But in my experience, a perfect gentleman is nothing more than a patient wolf.
Michael was known to be perhaps a womanizer, but he was a good-looking guy, and he was known to have money. So I think that helped him a lot with the opposite sex.
Jan knew at times that Michael was cheating on her. I remember one time she found a receipt from flowers that she didn't receive, and she confronted him about it, and he just blew it off.
While adultery isn't exactly something to sweep under the rug, Jan has a family to consider.
Jan looked at the good side of Michael and wanted to help make him better. So they entered into marriage counseling together, and that's how they moved past it.
By the summer of 2008, it seems like things are on the up and up. With their 20th anniversary just around the corner, Michael has a little surprise in store for Jan.
He was planning a renewal of the wedding vows for he and Jan on the beach at the Outer Banks. It was supposed to be a surprise.
But things don't always go as planned. Someone's about to throw a wrench into this happily ever after. Meet 33-year-old Angie Derrick.
Mike Roseborough went to the same coffee shop as Angie. In the morning, on their way to work, they would exchange glances, maybe have a few words. But she was married for a long time, and she had a couple kids and was raising a family.
You know, to some people that little ring of gold actually means something. But I can assure you that's not always the case.
Eventually that escalated to speaking outside of the coffee shop. And then it turned to telephone, emails, and that's when the relationship really started gaining momentum.
And as love affairs often do, things heat up fast.
It went from conversation, I'm attracted to you, I'm interested in you, to full-on love affair. There were these deep, passionate emails that they exchanged with one another every minute in some cases.
You know, women really are suckers for a love letter.
You brought out the lion in me. I love you madly, Angie.
I will be by your side no matter what.
Keeping this relationship from the neighbors, from the community, considering Michael Roseborough and who he was, would be impossible. This was a secret bound to get out.
Ah, there's nothing like a little danger to stoke the fires of passion. But when things get this hot, there's no telling who will get burned.
Jan was going to find out. Angie's husband was going to find out. Everybody was going to know about this sooner or later, and everything was going to blow up.
This trio is about to implode. A man, a wife, and a lover. And one of them will have to go. But which one? Let me introduce you to a deadly trio. Michael, successful businessman, father, husband. Jan, beautiful wife, loving mother. And Angie, Michael's married mistress. Suffice it to say, Michael's got a full plate.
Mike and Angie went from 0 to 60 quick. Once they realized they were both on board with this affair, they went after it. They had plans to be married. They were going to go the distance with this thing.
That means one of the trio will have to go. But which one will become a killer?
I want to be Mrs. Roseboro so bad it hurts.
I will give up everything I have if that is what it takes to be your husband.
Well, talk is cheap, but a divorce can be pricey. And Michael knows a split from Jan will cost him much more than lawyers' fees.
His reputation was at stake. His financial well-being was at stake. If he got divorced, I think he would have been kicked out of the house, and I think he would have lost custody of the children.
It's safe to say that Michael is attached to his lifestyle. And so is Jan. A split means that she could get half of everything.
Jan was gonna get a lot if this came to divorce. And I think Michael knew that.
And it seems Jan knows a few things as well. Fool her once, shame on you. Fool her twice, and watch your back.
Jan said to her daughter, "Where's your dad?" And she replied that he went to the funeral home to do some paperwork. And Jan said, "It's amazing how much paperwork your dad has lately." I think she knew that he was having an affair.
But never underestimate the power of the other woman.
I think when Mike came into the picture, Angie felt like a kid in a candy store. She had it all in front of her, things she never had before. She couldn't resist going after them.
Hello.
In a quiet town on a quiet street, two families face ruin at the hands of an illicit affair. And on a hot, steamy night in July, someone will bring this love triangle to a violent end.
On July 22nd, 2008, Jan was seen at the local bank, making transactions, daily chores, doing mom things. Like Roseboro was with Angie for hours, in a motel with this woman, having this deep, passionate affair.
Later that evening, back at home, Michael puts the kids to bed. It's a warm, balmy night, perfect for enjoying a glass of wine by the glow of the pool. But Michael isn't in the mood.
Mike Roseboro said that he had gone to bed around 10 o'clock that evening, and he had left his wife Jan out at the pool. He said that he woke up at 10:58 and saw that the lights were on outside the pool, so he went outside to check on the lights, and that's when he found his wife Jan in the pool.
Lancaster County 911. I believe our wife just drowned. I'm sorry? I believe our wife just drowned. Okay. Is she breathing? No, she's not.
The operator instructs Michael to begin CPR until paramedics arrive.
The paramedics arrived at the Roseboro home. Michael was pacing a bit, but he wasn't frantic. He wasn't in a tizzy as many folks would be seeing their wife close to death on the pool deck. Instead of getting in his own car, maybe having a friend quickly drive him to the hospital, he did none of that. He stayed put while his wife, by every account, was fighting for her life in the back of an ambulance.
At 11:57 p.m., alone in the emergency room, Jan Roseboro is pronounced dead.
Jan's sister came into the house, and she was saying, "Jan's gone, Jan's gone." fell in the pool, and she's dead. It was truly one of those type of surreal moments. You really just couldn't wrap yourself around it.
It was just odd that she would have fallen into the pool. Jan could swim, so it just didn't make sense.
Of course it doesn't make any sense. The question is, what really happened?
Mike speculated to police. He thought Jan had some sort of accident by the pool. He thought maybe she slipped, fell in the pool, and drowned.
Doubtful.
Michael's initial reporting to police was filled with holes. He claimed he rushed into the water, saved Jan, brought her out, yet he was dry. Also, he told police that he saw the lights on when he woke up. Neighbors said those pool lights were off.
And that's not the only thing that's off about Michael's story. At the scene, police find no signs of a slip and fall. In fact, it all looks a little too neat and tidy. And according to the autopsy, Jan's death was a lot more messy.
Jan Roseborough died from a combination of blunt force trauma, strangulation, and her lungs were filled with water and she had drowned. But she didn't drown by accident. She was murdered.
I heard that Jan's death was a murder, and it just made me numb. It was just shocking. I couldn't think of anyone that would want to hurt Jan.
Well, Michael conveniently has a theory all his own.
He recalled that she was wearing $40,000 worth of jewelry that night. He assumed perhaps that was a motive for a robbery, that maybe someone came through the pool gate and attacked her.
It's an interesting thought. Diamonds are a girl's best friend, and I'd certainly fight to the death for mine. Only there's one small problem with Michael's story.
The last time I saw Jan was actually the day that she died. And she came in the bank. We had a conversation about the day and things that they had planned to do that day. And I mean, women notice other women's jewelry, and I knew she didn't have it on that day.
We had her on videotape at the bank that afternoon, wearing the same clothes and not wearing any jewelry. And of course, if she's not wearing the jewelry out in public, why in the world would anybody put this jewelry on at 10 o'clock at night in your backyard pool?
Sounds like Michael's theory only points a finger at him. And things certainly appear to be peachy keen with the Roseboroughs.
Michael did say to the police that, my relationship with Jan Roseborough was great. In fact, we're going to go renew our wedding vows in a few weeks.
But we all know that's not true. Now, don't we?
We didn't know about the affair until we got an anonymous tip. We followed up with it by approaching Angela, and she immediately admitted that they were involved.
Naughty Angie. Wanting another woman's man. Well, getting rid of the competition is certainly one way to snag him.
Police asked Angie what was going on with this past affair. Angie responded off the cuff, "I didn't know it ended." Angie told the police that she had spoken with Mike several times on the day Jan was killed. Those discussions included plans to pursue this fantasy wedding together, to leave everything behind and be together.
A few hours before Jan's murder, she'd actually emailed Mike Roseborough and said something to the effect of, I can't wait to be Mrs. Roseborough, and I know it's going to happen soon.
Heavens, I love a wedding as much as the next girl. But mere hours before committing murder? This is pushing it, even for me.
Mike and Angie were adults with families. This was almost delusional, what they thought was going to come out of this affair. So there's a motive there to have Jan out of this picture.
There's just one teensy problem. Angie has a rock-solid alibi.
Her husband, who certainly had some reason to have some animosity toward Angie at that time, alibied his wife consistently from the beginning. From when we talked to him, he said she was in bed.
So that just leaves Michael. Investigators are hoping that if Angie does know something, they can get her to turn on her lover.
When the police officers told Angie that there had been other affairs for Michael, there had been women before, she was extremely upset. In fact, I think her words were, "I feel like the scorned woman."
Lost in the passion of the whirlwind affair, Angie failed to notice how good Michael was at this game.
Michael, who's Kathy? Apparently you were seeing somebody else right before me. I trusted you.
The police maybe thought there was more to the story that Angie was keeping quiet. Maybe this revelation that Mike was sort of a ladies' man would prompt that to come about.
I'm telling you, better not be lying to me.
And as Angie continues to talk, it starts sounding like something right out of a soap opera.
I can't believe that you would jeopardize what we had. All those dreams we had.
Sick, twisted obsession is the way I would sum up their relationship. In this particular case, Mike Roseborough's world revolved around Angie, and there was one big obstacle between him and Angie, and that was Jan Roseborough.
My dearest Angie, I promise you that I will be right here, and I will do whatever it takes to make you my wife.
Sounds like a man on a mission. Luckily, Michael's left a convenient trail of clues.
The night that his wife died, he could see he had been scratched by someone or something. His face was actually bleeding when he went to a police interview. Police asked Mike, "What happened to your face?" He said, "Oh, I was playing with the kids in the pool. I got scratched."
Sounds reasonable. Or not.
The daughter that he picked to say had scratched him bit her nails down to the quick. She almost had no nails, which she couldn't have scratched him or anybody.
But Jan wasn't the kind of girl to shy away from a little pampering at the salon. And her manicured nails hold the biggest clue of all.
There's just no doubt that Jan Roseborough fought back in this case because there was enough DNA under her fingernails for us to find her killer. It was Mike Roseborough's DNA.
Just when you think you can get away with murder, along comes that pesky little thing called science.
Jan Roseborough was not as strong as Mike Roseborough. She wasn't able to win, but she left the DNA that helped us convict her killer. So in a way, she gave some of the most powerful testimony that we could have had.
In July of 2009, Michael Roseborough goes to trial for the murder of his wife. He claims he is innocent, but a jury knows better. He's sitting in Mahanoy State Prison right now, serving a life sentence.
Jan was a kind soul. She was a good person and mother who should have the right to still be here. We need to recognize that it's okay to walk out with our dignity with our kids so that they can't be damaged any further.
Michael truly wasn't the person that anybody knew. It was just sickening to think that he thought he could get away with it, that he was actually that kind of person.
Angie is never charged in the crime. And no one knows exactly what sent Michael over the edge that fateful night.
What's clear is that he put her in a neck hold. She reached up and scratched him. At some point, he may have thrown her down and she would have gotten the trauma to the back of her head, and then he held her down until she drowned.
It's the ultimate betrayal with a most tragic ending.
There was great risk for Mike and Angie to have this extramarital affair, but they didn't care. Nothing was going to stop.
Michael brutally murdered his wife in an extreme act of betrayal because he had an obsession to be with his girlfriend, and it's absolutely despicable.
Lust. It can make us do such awful things. But it's not always the husband who succumbs to the temptations of the flesh. Just a trip to the local pool can make a girl quiver with the possibilities. But be careful what you wish for. Romancing two men can be devilishly fun, but it won't go over so well at the church picnic, especially when somebody turns up dead. In Olathe, Kansas, there are 3 people in every marriage: a husband, a wife, and the Holy Spirit. You see, Olathe is a Christian town, a holy hamlet deep in the heartland where just a glance around church on Sunday will tell you who is homesick and who has some explaining to do.
Back in the day, you'd go to church Sunday morning, you go to church Sunday night and Wednesday night. It was pretty much the way things were. There were certain things that you didn't do. You knew that you didn't drink, and you didn't smoke, and you don't go out with girls that do.
But even here, good girls can do bad things. Sometimes all it takes is one spark before marriages explode and lives are burned to the ground. And David and Melinda Harmon know all about sparks.
David and Melinda met at a Nazarene summer camp when they were about 15 years old. And like other summer camps, there was interest between the boys and the girls.
Ah, camp. The cozy cabins, the hot summer nights. It's the setting for so many budding romances. But Bible camp isn't exactly the kind of place where teenage hormones can be unleashed.
Obviously, premarital sex was out. They couldn't even kiss, and they'd be told on if they were found kissing. The relationships had to be the definition of chaste.
So when a kiss by the campfire is forbidden, I guess there's just one thing left for young lovebirds to do when summer comes to an end.
It was incredibly common for Nazarenes to get married young, 19, 20, 21. David and Melinda didn't see any other options in life. Everybody around them got married young, and so did they.
In 1977, at just 20 years old, David and Melinda get married and settle in Olathe, Kansas to start their lives together and enjoy the benefits of married life.
David and Melinda were very happy. They seemed like the perfect Nazarene couple, the perfect Christian marriage, and he loved her very much. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
And she loves him. But who wouldn't? David is the perfect combination of brawn and brains.
David was big, he was handsome, and David was whip smart. After he met Melinda, he went to the University of Kansas and became a business major. David ended up working at a bank. He was a loan officer. He was dutiful. He did a good job.
And you can bet your last dollar a 20-something go-getter like David grabs the attention of his female co-workers.
We gals just loved him. He always had a smile, always had a giggle, and always had something in mind to make you laugh.
Well, what woman doesn't love a man with a sense of humor? Meanwhile, Melinda has what every girl dreams of, and what every man drools over. That bubbly blonde has a body made for more than just praying. But she isn't exactly all looks and no smarts.
Melinda got a job working as the secretary of the Dean of Students at Mid-America Nazarene University. Melinda was always very outgoing, very eager to meet people, and she enjoyed working with the students.
And one of those students is an impressive young senior, 21-year-old Mark Mangelsdorf.
Mark Mangelsdorf was the big man on campus. He was student body president. He was the man that everyone really wanted to be. 6'4", about 240 pounds, a handsome guy, and always eager to lend a hand or meet somebody.
Somebody like a pretty young secretary, perhaps?
Mark and Melinda became friends because Mark, in his capacity as student body president, would always be passing through the dean's office. It seemed Melinda was taking real interest in Mark.
Ah, the advantages of a small college. It's so easy to get intimate with the student body.
Melinda, Mark, and David had a strange dynamic because Melinda met Mark and subsequently introduced him to David. Those two, in turn, became close friends. They'd play racquetball together, they'd play floor hockey together, and afterward, they'd go out to get something to eat together.
I played gym hockey with Dave, and if Dave was going to be playing, Mark would probably be coming too, and they would come together and leave together. I would drive by the Harmon home, and I would see Mark's car parked there every single night.
And Melinda? Well, she was the model of Christian hospitality.
Melinda would make meals for him, she'd do his laundry. This was, for all intents and purposes, their younger brother.
I just passed it off that they were very good friends. They're just kind of taking him under their wing. But I always sensed that it was Mark imposing on them.
You know what they say. The best of friends make the worst of enemies. And while three may be company, it's one too many in a marriage.
I don't think a college student had any business spending all of his time at a young married couple's house. To me, there would be only one of two reasons. He either wanted to be with David or he wanted to be around Melinda.
They'd stand too close, they'd laugh too much, they spent too much time alone without David.
And it certainly is curious when Mark moves just a few blocks away from David and Melinda.
In the middle of his senior year, Mark did the completely untraditional and unexpected. He gave up his dorm room to move across town but about a quarter mile away from David and Melinda's house. There was plenty of speculation. David himself was much less condemning of Mark's being over his house so much, but others started to get this gathering sense of suspicion that something amiss was going on.
In a Christian town where a rising hemline can be taboo, tongues are wagging.
We heard Mark and Melinda were seeing each other, or Mark was over there all the time. It was just mind-boggling to us. We couldn't believe David's wife would do anything like that because he was so crazy about her.
Things between these two are just heating up. But a dip in the pool is certainly a fine way to cool down in the summer heat.
A neighbor saw them together in a community pool, holding hands and being very close and intimate together.
When Melinda realized that the neighbor was seeing just what they were doing, she got out of the pool quickly and immediately went on the charm offensive to talk to him and distract him.
Since nobody has eyes inside their bedrooms, it's tough to say how far these two went, but they certainly have no problem professing their love on paper.
Dear Mark, my feelings go very deep. I believe you are a special gift from God. Love, Melinda.
Selfish Melinda, test driving a newer model just because the old one had a few chips in the paint.
David, over the last several years, had been letting himself go. Melinda was one to whom appearances mattered a lot. Enter Mark, who was this big, bright man who was obviously ambitious and clearly going places, big places.
When the wife is shopping around, the husband is always the last to know. And no one likes to be last. But David is no fool, and tensions are starting to simmer.
I had mentioned to him that we were going to play gym hockey that weekend. And so I said, make sure you tell Mark what time. And he goes, I'm not my brother's keeper. At that point in time, I knew that their relationship was getting strained. I felt that Dave thought there might be something going on between Mark and Melinda.
Too bad there's no easy fix to this unlikely love triangle.
Had Dave and Melinda gotten a divorce, it would have definitely changed their position in the Nazarene Church. It would have changed both of their lives dramatically.
Between a rock and a hard place is such a tough spot to be. And everyone in this threesome has something to lose.
If the affair became public, David would have been a little bit on the outskirts of his society. Mark would have faced disciplinary action from the school, and there's a good chance that he would have been kicked out. And Melinda would have lost her job. The stigma attached to her would have possibly been something she couldn't live down.
With so much on the line, it was about time for David to lay down the law.
The last time that I played hockey with Dave, he didn't want to be there. He told us specifically, I've got to leave at 3 o'clock. You could just tell that there was something wrong. Came around to 3 o'clock and he was out the door. I had never seen Dave that way before.
Tensions are high in the Harmon house. And for one of them, it's do or die.
their feelings for each other, all took place under the umbrella of this incredibly restrained environment. And sometimes when you have passion in a restrained environment, it detonates.
And justice will be tough to come by.
It was years that we were so frustrated, and then finally we realized nothing was going to be done because they couldn't prove it.
With a strapping young co-ed, Mark Mangelsdorf, wedging his way in the middle of David and Melinda Harmon's marriage, things have been a little uncomfortable, to say the least. Well, someone is about to take matters into their own hands and eliminate the third wheel.
On February 28th, 1982, the Harmons' neighbor in their duplex reported in the middle of the night hearing large thwacking noises. The neighbor couldn't go back to sleep. Then, finally, about an hour and a half later, there were desperate knocks on the door.
The neighbor opens the door to find a distressed Melinda.
Melinda said that she had been robbed. David had been hit, and she had been knocked unconscious. The neighbor looked and saw a light bruise on Melinda's cheek. There was also blood on the lower reaches of her nightgown. The neighbor described Melinda's demeanor as a state of shock.
Moments later, when police arrive at the Harmon home, they find a grisly scene.
There was blood all over the walls, on the ceiling of that room. It was a clear case of massive overkill, probably done with a blunt instrument. That was, without doubt, one of the goriest murder scenes that I'd ever seen.
And for David's friends, the word murder is difficult to hear.
This can't be true. This can't be right. It was just utter disbelief. Why, David? Why?
I was just stunned. I mean, who would do this to this guy? I mean, he's such a great guy. It made no sense whatsoever. I just walked around in a daze.
Funny, Melinda seems to be dealing with the loss all too well. First she takes a lover, and then her husband turns up dead. Surely I've heard this story before.
Melinda said that two black men broke into the house, and they were wanting to get the keys from the bank from her husband. That they got the keys and they beat him to death.
So the police went to the bank, armed to the teeth, to intercept these bank robbers. And they waited, and they waited. And the bank robbers, who had killed to get the keys, never managed to arrive.
Melinda sure has a vivid imagination. Too bad she's left a few holes in her story.
Said somebody punched her and knocked her out. She had a little scrape on her cheek, but it was not consistent with the kind of force it would take to knock you out.
It seems like Melinda is forgetting one tiny detail: forensic evidence.
Her story was that she was laying next to her husband when he was beaten to death. The patterns of blood spatter on her nightgown were, in fact, much more consistent with somebody standing a few feet away.
With Melinda watching from a distance, it sounds like someone else was doing her dirty work. Well now, I wonder who her helper could be.
Mark Mangelsdorf came right over to the crime scene. He rushed right over.
He said he was there because he's a family friend and he wants to support Melinda and see how his friend David was, so on and so forth.
But we all know Mark isn't just a concerned friend, now is he?
It was a curiosity because he arrived freshly showered and wearing a corduroy coat. Mark's best friend had just been murdered, and he took the time to make himself presentable. It didn't make sense.
And a search around Mark's apartment leads to even more suspicion.
Investigators found a lot of cards and some letters in Mark Mangelsdorf's bedroom in his apartment, secreted away in a little file box.
These were love letters from Melinda to Mark. They were passionate.
The Lord sent you my way. I love you.
It wasn't clear whether they were having an actual overt sexual relationship, but what was clear was that these letters were inappropriate. Mark and Melinda having an affair said to investigators that there could possibly be a motive. And these two were your main suspects.
You would think this saga is just about over, but you'd be wrong. Some people get away with murder, at least for a while.
The authorities didn't have an ironclad case. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence, but it wasn't the perfect textbook case by any means.
As the investigation idles, the rumors in Olathe carry on.
Mark and Melinda were very guilty in the court of public opinion. So much gossip and things had leaked out about Mark and Melinda, we kept waiting for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Only the next thing never comes, and the lucky lovers are free to be together at last. But it's funny how life works out sometimes.
Mark got into Harvard Business School, got his MBA at Harvard. Melinda left Olathe almost immediately after the funeral. Bolted.
She went to Ohio, where she had family, and eventually went on with her life.
All that just to split up? What a strange ending to this sordid tale. But like every great story, this one has a twist.
The police essentially in 2001 reopened the case on a lark. Enough time had passed that maybe, just maybe, they could give it a whirl and solve the case.
In 2001, the detectives with Olathe came up with a theory that they ought to go just approach Melinda Harmon, hit her up cold, go back to Ohio, knock on her door with no warning and see if she'd talk to them.
But when detectives track down Melinda, they are the ones who are surprised. Apparently, time has been good to the ex-Mrs. Harmon.
Melinda had a completely charmed life in Ohio. She married a very successful cosmetic dentist. They lived in a huge suburban house at the end of a cul-de-sac.
More than likely, she isn't going to let a little snafu from her past mess things up.
The detectives would have not been the least bit surprised if the door would have been slammed in their face.
But they rang the doorbell, and the door opened, and there was Melinda wearing nothing but a bathrobe and a towel on her head.
Now that's what I call a greeting.
She not only didn't slam the door, but invited them in and was very willing to talk to them.
They simply asked her what had happened that night. All of a sudden, she told them that their husband was killed not by the two black guys, but by one white man. wearing a cloth mask, and she mentioned nothing about any bank use.
Well, memories do fade after 2 decades. But for investigators, this is exactly the break they are looking for.
There's no conceivable and feasible way that you could live through an experience this traumatic and forget the details. So it was certain, after hearing the second story, that Melinda had obviously been lying initially.
And the best way to keep a bevy of lies straight is to get it on the record. So detectives get her down to the station and into the hot seat.
When Melinda spoke to the detectives, it was a strange verbal do-si-do. But in the end, she sold Mark out.
Margaret, in my heart, I know that.
First, Melinda betrays her husband and then her true love. Suffice it to say, a woman's love is a fickle thing.
We reviewed that evidence over and over again. We felt we had enough to charge her with first-degree murder, but we also felt we had enough to convict her.
And they do. In May of 2005, Melinda Harmon, now Melinda Raish, trades in her posh suburban home for a cozy cot behind bars. She is found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison.
I was in such shock when I was told she was indeed guilty. I could have run up and down these streets, hooping and hollering. I could not believe it.
Now there is one fish left to fry. And police are surprised to see what a big fish Mark Mangelsdorf has become.
Mark, for his part, had led a life replete with satisfactions and accomplishment. He was COO of major corporations, made boatloads of money. He had made it in big time. He had it all.
And he has it all to lose.
Mark pleaded guilty because he had a tough case on his hands and he was facing a life sentence. The prosecutors offered him 10 to 20 and he said, you know what? This is a deal he could not take.
Mark Mangelsdorf may have spent the last 2 decades living the high life, but he's going to spend the next 10 to 20 years in a Kansas state prison paying for his sins in 1982.
I think that Melinda left the door unlocked that night. Mark came in, Melinda got out of bed and watched at a bit of a distance while Mark bludgeoned David to death. They murdered in order to be together and then abandoned each other.
And in this story, no one gets a happily ever after.
David did nothing to deserve getting beaten to death. It is just sick to believe that they can murder and then go have happy lives knowing that they killed a man.
Dave's death was totally pointless. There was no reason why he had to die. Mark and Melinda are going to have to make their peace with God. And that is for life. That's for eternity.
Call me old-fashioned, but I always had a very simple solution for when I caught my husband's hand in the cookie jar. I call it a divorce. But unfortunately, some people resort to more drastic measures. My best advice for stories like these? Keep your friends close, and your spouse's friends even closer.